Satyajit, when we were talking, you mentioned that, when Aamir first talked to you, I mean, you actually worked with Aamir, you did the making of Lagan, you traveled with them, you're very familiar with each other's work.
Right.
So when he called you and said, okay, we want to do a television show, I understand you almost forgot about the meeting.
Right.
So did you think he was really serious about it? Or tell me the beginning of this idea.
Well, around 4 or 5 years back, Aamir, whom I knew earlier, met me and told me that he wanted to do a television show on social issues. And what that show would be about, he said, I have no idea. I only know that I want to use the power of television to try and give back to society. Now here there was a brilliant opportunity because basically television goes out to nearly 1 billion people in India. And there was also a big challenge that when you want to deal with social issues, television has forgotten the power of dealing with social issues. In fact, it's believed that television is meant to forget about social issues. It's meant to be a narcotic where you forget about all these. So although the opportunity exists, nobody believes that that's what it's meant for. So he gave me the power to go out, build a team, and figure out what that show would be about. So I set about with just 2 people. There was Lancy Fernandez, who's been a very old companion of mine and colleague in many things we've done together. And the second person I selected to join the team was my wife, Swati, who's here right now. And a lot of well-wishers told both of us, and told me in particular, this is the simplest way of losing your wife. And
it's to work together.
It's to work together. And actually I completely agree.
It was a wonderful opportunity, yes.
And actually, the moment we started working together and researching together, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. In fact, I set off for 3 months, leaving hearth and home to him.
Yeah.
I was looking into field research, and what we had decided was that let's take a few topics and work on them, and let's see what life throws up. Let's see what the ground realities are. Yeah. And since I was the only mother on the team, we decided to take up the issue of female feticide. Yeah. And the idea was to go out and speak to different people who might be able to contribute something in terms of experience, thought, and see what comes out of it. And one of the things we found when we did a lot of desk research before we set out and lots of discussions, there is a lot of writing on the subject exists. And everywhere we found that the focus was on the millions of girls missing, the girls killed in the womb, and certainly that's not a wrong focus.
And the girls saying, save me.
Yeah, the girls saying, save me, oh mother, please allow me to live. I'll eat my brother's leftovers, I'll wear his old clothes, I will never ask for a toy, I will always be your budhape ki lathi, I mean I will be your support in your old age, but please let me live. So what we found is that with motherhood, a mother is central to motherhood. So where is the voice of the woman in all of this? Where is the voice of the mother? So one of the things that I set out to do very early was to try and meet as many mothers as possible. And I traveled all over the country speaking to mothers. And because I'm a mother, it was very easy to connect. Oh, how many kids do you have? I have 2 kids. How old are they? And then you like sharing pregnancy stories and stories about motherhood. Some of the things that those journeys threw up were so devastating. I think, I don't know whether I will recover ever from all of that. But it really taught us as a team a lot. And I thought maybe we could start off by sharing a small video with a little preface. This never made it to the episode eventually because this girl didn't want to share her story in public. But her amazing generosity, she shared it with me on camera. You will find that it's blurred her face to protect her identity. And it's also very dark. Now, I had no experience with video, but she didn't want a camera unit at all there and no lights. So it's just done in a very dimly lit room, and I'd like to share it with everybody.
सबने बोल दिया अबॉर्शन करा दो, कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है रखने की. तुम्हें इतनी सी अकल नहीं है कि अगर बेटी है तो एक है ही पहले से, और क्या लाइन लगाओगी घर में. सबने ऐसे दबाव सा बनाया, मैं चारों तरफ से ऐसे मेंटली मैं एक तरह से ऐसे हो गई थी कि जैसे पागल नहीं होता है, उससे भी बुरी हालत मेरी हो गई थी. मुझे ये लगता था कि मेरा मतलब मैं कुछ हूँ या नहीं हूँ, मैं इंसान भी हूँ या नहीं. तो जब अबॉर्शन के लिए गए तब भी मैं यही सोच रही भगवान ने कुछ कहीं से समझ आ जाए ये बात कि नहीं कराएं. एडमिट होते होते ही मैंने बोला, मैंने कहा अभी सोच लो एक बार। तो वो दवाई रखने आई नर्स, उसके पहले मैंने उन्हें रोक दिया, हाथ पकड़ लिया, मैंने कहा 2 मिनट रुक जाओ, मैं अपने हस्बैंड से बात कर लूँ, शायद उनकी समझ आ जाए ये चीज़। पर नहीं, ओटी में लेके गए, वहाँ पे जब काफ़ी देर तक पेन होते रहे, जब वो बच्चा बाहर आके निकला तो यहाँ पे मुझे पुश किया गया पेट पे। और जब वो बच्चा बाहर निकला, एक ट्रे जैसे होती है, कुछ स्टील की थी, उस पे आगे उसकी जो आवाज़ हुई ना, ऐसे टन जैसे होती है, कोई चीज़ स्टील के बर्तन पे से आके कुछ डाल दे, प्याज वगैरह जैसे कुछ डाल दो उस पर, मोटी चीज़। वो चीज़ मेरे आज भी, अगर मैं ध्यान से उसे सोचती हूँ ना, काम करते हुए भी कई बार बर्तन में भी आवाज़ हो जाती है, मुझे वही चीज़ याद आ जाती है तुरंत। फिर मुझे उस नर्स ने दिखाया भी था उस लड़की को, उसको तो मुझे पता नहीं, आज तक शायद किसी की शक्ल याद नहीं होगी, पर वो लड़की क्या था वो मुझे नहीं पता, बट जो भी था मुझे अब तक ऐसा याद है बिल्कुल। उसके ऐसे हाथ यूँ, दोनों पैर यूँ मुड़े हुए थे उसके, ऐसे यूँ, और ऐसे शेप थी उसकी, आंखें जैसे यूँ बंद करके, ये ऐसे पलकें नहीं थी, बस स्किन थी ऐसे, और नाक की उभरी हुई जगह, मुंह की उभरी हुई जगह। मैं पागल हो गई थी उसे देख के, बिल्कुल मेरा ऐसा दिमाग हो गया था कि मुझे समझ नहीं आता था मैं क्या करूँ, कहाँ जाऊँ। उस दिन से तो फिर इतनी घबराहट, 24 घंटे तो ऐसे लगने लगा कि मैं मर जाऊँगी, मैं पता नहीं मेरा क्या होगा।
So when you have something like this, how do you even, kind of digest it?
It's not possible to digest actually.
Yeah.
And you're seeing 2 minutes of hours. I had about 4 hours with her before her husband was to return, and I had to leave the house. We have met dozens and dozens, hundreds of people. And I must confess that at the end of all of this, I had to actually go away for a Vipassana meditation course. It was impossible to otherwise process.
Yeah. Now, you look at things like this that are so difficult to digest. It makes you angry. It makes you helpless. It makes you don't know what to do. Now, how do you take information like that and actually convert into something that could potentially have some action? And how do you, I'm sure there are 100 stories like this. How do you pick one, and how do you make it into a 1-hour show? How do you pick who comes, and how do you create that voice?
Right. I think the first thing, Lakshmi, is that what these encounters, these experiences taught us is, number one, that no matter how many books you read, no matter how many research papers you study, there is nothing like learning from people who tell their own stories. The power of first-person testimony and the power of that story is what really carried to us. And what we learned is that this is the way to take complex social issues and engage with millions and millions of people with them. Because these stories are simply so powerful, so true, so poignant, that when you hear these stories, you have to have a change in your perspective. So even the person who does not agree with us, even the person who has perhaps committed female feticide, will perhaps reflect differently after watching these kind of stories. So the challenge before us is, how do we get the right stories, and how do we get them in all their innocence and in all their truth, and with no devices on a national platform. So the entire engagement of our entire team has been very clear from day one that this is not the Aamir Khan show. This is a show about voices that have never been heard, people who have never been seen, but who've got poignant stories to tell, with the belief that a story can change the world. So selecting the right people, the first thing is to go out and get a lot of material. So for every episode, if there is 66 minutes on air, there is another 150 hours that we have documented, and which perhaps all of it are stories that need and deserve to be told.
And one of the things that comes across very clearly is that you respect the guests. I mean, I've seen the taping of one of the shows, and I see how you treat all of them. You are the one who goes out into the field, talks to all of them. what is your I mean, you form such, she has to have such amount of trust with you to be able to tell that story.
Well, we
So
speak
what's your
almost every
relationship
month.
with them afterwards?
Yes, we speak almost every month, even now, and I think I've had the privilege of, being able to make so many friends in so many places that I would never have otherwise reached and gone to. I think each one of them has really made a huge contribution to my life. And no doubt, of course, in the warp and weft of life, it's hard to keep up with so many people, but I would be loath to let go of even a single one of these relationships. Lakshmi, if I might, there's a little good news also,
Yeah.
Now, this is a little girl whose parents had decided to do a sex-selective abortion. She was still in utero, and there was tremendous pressure in the family, and that morning, Sunday morning, 6th May, what was it?
That's right, 2012.
2012, the whole family, the in-laws, everyone watched Satyamev Jayate. And after that, nothing needed to be said any longer. The pressure went away, and they had this beautiful daughter, and they actually wrote to us a very moving letter. So we went and met them, we interviewed them, we took photographs, and they are so delighted now to have this little girl in their lives.
And in the state of Maharashtra,
Yeah.
the sex ratio at birth improved by 50 points. That means it was 894 in 2011, and in 2013 it shot up by 50 points. So there are several lakhs of such, lives which have been saved, and it really shows that people can and do change.
Yeah. And, the other thing is, how do you choose the subjects? There are so many subjects that one ought to address, and how do you say this is a subject we want to address?
Well, it's also deeply subjective. It's things which we as individuals feel very strongly about. So we began with the girl child, then we did the second one was on child sexual abuse. So we did a lot of episodes which we felt as individuals in the core team strongly about. But the effort also was to try and deal with topics which basically every Indian should feel that this concerns me. I can't switch off because this is about me.
Yeah.
So that was
I mean, talking about child sexual abuse, you did the show, and again, what were some of the repercussions of that? You did the show, you aired it. What were some of the actions that were taken afterwards because of
Swati
that?
studied them much more closely.
Well, I think we can both speak about it, but one is that I think there was a national catharsis. We had about 19 lakh people writing in after the episode, most of them sharing their stories of sexual abuse as children, most of them adults now. Some shared really moving stories. There was an uncle who wrote about his niece who it happened to be her birthday. On the day of the telecast, that girl was dead. She'd committed suicide because she was unable to cope with sexual abuse at the hands of her own father. And he wrote with great sorrow. I still remember a letter that came from a hospital bed in Pakistan. It was a doctor, lady writing and saying that, I loved your episode. I'm constantly in and out of hospital with chronic asthma, and there is no known reason for my illness except that as a child I was sexually abused, and it was oral sex that was performed on me. So when you made that workshop warning children about different danger parts of the body, I wish you had also mentioned the mouth. There was an endless outpouring, like there's no other word for it but a catharsis. I think over 60 to 70% of my own teammates, the entire team with whom we worked, came out and told me about their own experience with child sexual abuse. And suddenly it had become okay to speak about it. There was a reference point. Kids were calling up mom and saying, Mom, did you watch Satyamev Jayate today? Because mom is an Aamir Khan fan. And mom said, yes. And she says, well, what happened to Harish happened to me. And it was Mamaji who did it. And then there was this whole coming out of the thing and dealing with it, sometimes after 20 and 30 years.
So it was very sad. It was very sad. But it was also important that it happened. Right. Because, silence is the greatest weapon that the perpetrators have. Yeah. And I think the breaking of that silence was very important. But obviously it was also traumatic for those who were talking about it, as also for us who were receiving it.
Yeah. I think you should speak about the law.
Yeah, and then there was a...
Well, the good thing is that each episode also tried to work towards some concrete action. So the concrete action in this episode was that till then, there was no specific law which protected children from sexual abuse. So there were many loopholes which the existing law, which was essentially designed for adults, had. So, for example, non-penetrative sexual encounters were not covered under the old law. So, the episode demanded that there should be a specific law. And within weeks of the episode airing, Parliament passed POSCO, which is the law which protects children today. And the last 2 years have seen a great number of cases and action happening under POSCO.
One of the first cases that was to be won was in fact by Bachpan Bachao Andolan, whose founder just won the Nobel this year. They filed the first case under that law and they won a conviction for a child who was being sexually abused.
So I would like to continue on this, the impact actually. You know, we're talking about law, we are talking about people, national catharsis, etc. Tell us a couple of more stories or a couple of more things that have come out.
Well, I'd love to share. We had an organization called Childline on our show for child sexual abuse, and we put out this number 1098, and they got 40 lakh calls, most of them from little kids in distress. And ladies, many people like this lady here on the screen, very simple housewife, they actually went in and volunteered and she was part of the rescue of her 3-year-old neighbor, a little girl who was actually raped and abandoned. And they found her and she was brought home, but the girl was actually slowly withering away. So this lady was very distressed, Seema ji, and she said, how do I help her? And then she saw our episode, she called 1098, Childline came in, and they were able to help that girl, come back. There was a little girl, there was a young girl who actually managed to get her sister rescued from a sex racket into which she had got trapped using the Childline helpline because she saw Satyamev Jayate. So there are innumerable stories, Lakshmi.
Thank you so much. The reason I wanted to share both of them is that, we see the show, we see the star, but we don't get to see really what happens behind the scenes. It's truly, work of people like Satyajit, Swati, and their entire team that does so much research, so much work behind the scenes to make this happen. So anyway, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.